This episode of Brains on Games is a preview of an award-winning game about engine building and worker placement. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and like I said earlier, this episode we're going to talk about a worker placement engine building game that's already won awards, even though it's not even out yet. It's a game that's going to come up on Kickstarter in a few weeks, a game called the Transcontinental. This is a game that works with between 1 and 4 players, so there is a solo mode. I would say kids age 12 and older can play it, but it is pretty complicated, so the box might say 14 and up. I played a 2-player game in about 90 minutes, and it was our first time trying it. Let's take a look at the Transcontinental. I've set everything up here. This game is about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1871. Only a few years after Canada was formed, we were working on this railroad to join the provinces together so that folks could travel and bring resources from one end of the country to the other. So of course it goes from east to west. And since this is the right side of the table for me, we'll start with east over here and west will travel along the board. Like I said earlier, we're talking about worker placement here. So you've got these little cylinders. Each player is going to have 3 of these. These cylinders are telegrams. They act as your workers in the game. On each turn, the train is going to begin traveling from east to west. Now, like I said, this is a preview of the game. This is a prototype. The pieces are going to look different. I think the retail version right now, they're planning on having a wooden train meeple, but if they reach their stretch goals on Kickstarter, it might be a metal one. So things might look different when you're actually playing an actual copy of this game. But your train is going to travel from east to west at the beginning of the turn. These telegrams that you're going to place are going to stop the train so that you can take some action on that space. That's the worker placement part. So in turn order, you can see the burgundy color goes first and then the yellow. You're going to stop the train to collect resources or drop off resources. Typically, those are going to be the most common actions in the game. If I were placing my workers and I wanted to develop some of these properties you can see along the board, I might grab some steel. Then the yellow player is going to place theirs. They might grab some navigational engineers. I might decide that I wanted some wood as well, and the yellow player might take coal. So now we've got 2 each of our workers placed. You might decide that you want to save a worker because once the train gets to the end of the track, it's going to come back the other way and you can place a telegram again. But in this case, what I think that I want to do is develop this lumber mill. So I'll place my final telegram here beside the lumber mill. The yellow player might decide that they want to do the same thing. Maybe they're going to steal it from me. They can see what I'm going to be building here. What will happen at the beginning of your turn is the train, like I said, is going to start traveling. So when it hits the first telegram, it's going to stop. In this case, it stopped on coal. The yellow player is going to be able to gather a couple of pieces of coal to put in the hopper here, which will go on the track here on the line. Then it moves along. Now here on this space, the yellow player is going to get 2 navigational engineers. We'll put those here on the track. They're supposed to go on the right-hand side and go back from there. Next, we're going to grab some steel. So there's 2 steel here on this track. And then finally, we'll grab some wood and we'll put the wood on the train as well. Okay, now the train's going to continue. Like I said, most of the actions you're going to be taking are about loading resources onto the train or unloading them. If you did stop on this space, what you would do is you can steal. The yellow player could take the first player and then the play order would change. But in this case, burgundy is still going to be first. So we'll leave things the way they are. Now, we're stopping here in the lowlands. You can choose now to unload some of those resources. Maybe you want to develop the lumber mill. Maybe you'd like to develop this port city. In this case, the yellow player will place one of these navigational engineers right here, sort of a wild card. You can see it's a little asterisk instead of a picture of the steel or what have you. Next, the train continues moving from east to west. It's going to stop here. The burgundy player wants to develop this lumber mill. So I'll take 2 of these steel. it's going to go here. The lumber mill now is developed. All of the resources have been placed. The player who placed the most of those resources is going to get 4 victory points. And then we'll take the cubes off and flip this over. Okay, yellow and burgundy both contributed resources to the development. What's going to happen? They're both going to be able to use it later on. Often what you'll be trying to do is block players from using some of those developments so that they can't build their engine in the way that they'd like to. Then the train gets to the end of the line. You'll take all of the telegrams off. We did use all of these resources, so they'll drop down. Next time you try to use resources at the port, you're only going to get 1 instead of 2. But now something interesting happens. Now you're at the end of the track, at the railhead. What happens during the railhead phase of the game is that players are going to bid resources to extend the track. The number of resources they bid determines how far that track goes. There's this little token here that maybe you can see, a little 2 symbol on it. That number 2 is pointing towards wood, so wood is doubled in value for these bids. Now, you've got a little shield that allows you to hide how much you're bidding. The other side of the shield has a cheat sheet so that you can see what all the symbols mean in case you've forgotten. And you're going to, each player will put some resources behind that shield. I've got 2 wood left, so I could bid 2 wood. Maybe the yellow player would bid his 1 navigational engineer. Now, because the wood is doubled, that means those 2 wood are worth 4 in the case of bidding. So here you've now got 4 wood. You've got 1 navigational engineer that have been bid. That adds up to 5, and that means 2 of these pieces can come off the board. The player who bid the most gets to choose first. In this case, they might choose the shield here, because if you take the shield, you're going to get 5 victory points. You also get to draw an ally card. I'll tell you about that in a moment. The yellow player now goes second. They don't get as many victory points, but they've got this little symbol, which means that they do get an extra, a bonus telegram when the train goes on its way back. You could then place this bonus telegram right here because they can use that development. But first, we move the track forward. Now it's a little bit longer. Why would you want to do that? Well, you'd want to do that because that gives you access to additional spaces on the board that you can develop. More victory points, more resources. Let's move the point tracker forward here. We've got 4 for building this. We've got 5 more for choosing the tile in the lowlands. Now the train's going to go back the other way. I put the wrong bonus telegram on here. It should be yellow. And the train's going to stop as it's going from west to east. It's going to stop at the telegram. Now we're at the lumber mill. Yellow, in this case, can now gather 2 wood. Finally, the train gets all the way back to the end and the process starts again. One other thing happens, though, when it gets to the end is the resupply phase. If you've got this hopper full of coal, you can add an additional car to the line, which is going to extend things. It gives you more options in terms of where you can store the resources, and you can only bid resources if they're in the train here on the line. You might gather extra resources that won't fit on the train. Those, though, are going to go at the top in the yard. They only come onto the line if this hopper is full during the resupply phase, and the first player can choose to take one of those cars that are up here and bring them down onto the track. So there's a lot of things going on here. There are a lot of choices to make. Of course, it's a historical game. It's about a real period in history. So you've got that knowledge of history that you're advancing. I mentioned the allies earlier. There are a bunch of different ally cards. You might be able to work with Sir John A. Macdonald. No relation, although that's one of the reasons why I was excited to play the game, because Sir John A. is in it. You might have, when I played, I had Louis Riel was my ally. At the beginning of the game, you get 1 ally. There are actions that you can take through the game that might give you additional ones. These allies are hidden and they give you some extra power. In the case of Louis Riel, you're able to trade one of your resources that you have here on the track and then portage it or add it to one of these developments. You don't have to use a telegram. You don't have to wait for the train to stop there. You can put the resource anywhere because it's being portaged instead of traveling along the train track. In addition to the allies, there's another way for you to get points. You also have investments. In this case, you've got Dominion Investment Company. And if I've got little buildings on developments that have this little mountain symbol on them, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but 3 of those will allow me to get 8 victory points at the end. Now, you can only count that once, so you might want to gather multiple investments as you go across the board. Like I said, there's the historical element to this game. There's biographies of the allies in the rule book. There's also the fact that you're never going to be able to do all the things you want to do. You have to budget your actions. You only get 3 usually. Sometimes you might get an extra one, but usually you're only going to get 3 actions on your turn. You have to decide, am I going to spend my resources on developing these properties here, or am I going to spend them on bidding to extend the train track so I have access to more options? So you're planning ahead, you're budgeting your actions, you're really needing to pay attention to a lot of information on the board here. And if you're planning ahead and working towards that goal of extending the railroad and increasing the number of victory points you've got, well, planning ahead is all about the executive functions. So this is a game that focuses not only on the historical elements, it's a game about those executive functions, planning ahead and working towards a goal. And that is the Transcontinental in a nutshell. An upcoming game. It's already won some design awards. It's going to hit Kickstarter early in November of 2020. If you have any questions or suggestions for me, you can always find me at brian@brainsongames.ca. brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where previous episodes will be posted and future episodes will go up there too. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Instagram feed and the Facebook page, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to be notified when future ones come up, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.